is to bring an item or two to the table, and then to entertain questions for Dr. Markos as a sort of moderator intermediary, but it seems to me he needs no intermediary at all. What can I bring to the table? As I was listening to you, Lou, many things were going on. I mean, the synapses were snapping together as you were speaking. I was making application of what Lou said to things I know and the life I lead. And two things occurred to me. They might seem to you to be very silly. But the next time you have a chance to read The Great Gatsby,
oh yes,
think of that light that he sees out on Long Island and ask yourself, is this man more than a gangster? Is he more than a mere romantic? Does he long for something which he cannot have in this world? I, of course, think the answer is yes, and I think Fitzgerald knew exactly what he was doing, but I've never heard much discussed about this. And then we have one of my wife's favorite plays and movies, which I never got until I started to watch it again, dutifully. She recorded it and said, you have to watch it because maybe now you'll understand it. And I think I do. I think I do. Blanche is troubled by many things, but she's also nourished by desire for something even she doesn't understand. And in the end, you know, the great last line, I wonder if you agree with this, the great last line is, I've always relied upon the kindness of strangers. The implication is, yeah, he is a stranger. He's been a stranger to you. But maybe he won't always be a stranger to you. And since you have longed for him in this world, you're the one who looks nuts. But actually, you may be the sanest person in this play, contrasted, of course, with Stanley's carnality. Anyway, those were thoughts that you put forth, and I thank you for those. And
did it make you think of what's the Woody Allen movie? It's like a remake of that.
No, nothing you said made me think of Woody Allen. Nothing at all. And if I had, I would have repressed it.
Blue Jasmine. It's like a remake.
Yes, but you did. But I wonder if I can take a little time, if you don't mind,
please,
to read this aloud. Or would you like to read it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Lou is talking about things that are very exalted, and of course Tennyson was quite beautiful. I've never heard it like that, but thank you for that. But here's a poem by C.S. Lewis called The Day with a White Mark. The white mark, of course, being joy, angel, longing. And here's what Lewis says. All day I have been tossed and whirled in a preposterous happiness. Was it an elf in the blood, or a bird in the brain, or even part of the cloudily crested 50-league-long, loud, uplifted wave of a journeying angel's transit, roaring over and through my heart? My garden is spoiled, my holidays are canceled, the omen hardened. The planned and unplanned miseries deepen, the knots draw tight. Reason kept telling me all day my mood was out of season. It was, too, in the dark ahead, the breakers only are white. Yet I could have kissed the very scullery taps. The color of my day was like a peacock's chest. In at each sense there stole ripplings and dewy sprinkles of delight that with them drew fine threads of memory through the vibrant thickness of the soul, as though there were transparenters and luminous trees should go there, and shining roots worked visibly far down below one's feet. So everything, the tick of the cock crowing in the yard, probing my soil, woke diverse, buried parts of mine to beat. Who knows if ever it will come again? Now the day closes. No one can give me or take away that key. All depends on the elf, the bird, or the angel. I doubt if the angel himself is free to choose when sudden heaven a man begins or ends. What do you think?
I want you to tell us how you experience joy watching baseball. This is the baseball guy.
Well,
Can you give us some examples of joy?
The question to me seems out of court. How can one not experience
there we go, see?
when watching Yankee baseball?
Oh, yeah, you're getting up the Mets.
don't know what's happening now in City Field, but my pagan fingers are crossed with Lewis to do something happen. But I'll give you a quick answer, because as Lewis says in an experimental criticism at the end of this wonderfully neglected book by Lewis, it takes you out of yourself, like in love, like in worship, like in prayer, like in some movies, like in romance, like in marriage, family, children, grandchildren, like with baseball for some, with something else for others. It takes you out of yourself. You transcend yourself. You'll remember this line. You transcend yourself and are never more yourself than when you do. Well, I think we're ready for questions.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Does anybody have a question? I'm not going to get up and pass the microphone.
Just shout it out.
Just shout it out if you do. You hold the mic. You'll be answering.
Oh. Oh, here we go.
Okay, yes. No, go ahead.
And since you're a Protestant, you're probably familiar with the Protestant apologist who concentrates on science, Hugh Ross.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife edits his books.
Right.
And his wife has a master's degree in English. And interestingly, your explanation about the reason why Lewis is so effective is his use of things that are not reason. But a point that his wife, Dr. Ross's wife, says is, it's because he's so good also. It's because he's so excellent with the English language. And that's why she thinks that he even surpasses the theologians and the philosophers. His command of the English language and communicating to people, even though he doesn't know as much philosophy, theology perhaps, that's one of the other things that pushes him to the top. What do you think?
You're talking about Hugh Ross or C.S. Lewis?
Hugh Ross's wife's commenting on why C.S. Lewis is so effective.
I mean, see it, and you know, it's really, you might have seen this, I think it's Walter Hooper that suggests this, that Lewis, I don't know if you know this, but Lewis still wrote with a dip pen. He didn't use a ballpoint pen. And you know how it works, you dip it in and you write and then it runs out. You can only write 6 or 7 words. And I don't know if you heard him say this, but Walter Hooper suggested that a lot of Lewis's syntax falls into 6 or 7 word phrases, which makes it even. I will tell you, and I think Jim can probably attest to this as well, that we've both become better writers and better speakers because we've done public venues instead of just always doing academic stuff.
And thinkers.
I think so too, because Lewis says if you can't take what you're saying and put it into simple, sort of Germanic words, then you probably don't know what you're talking about.
I wonder if the reverse of that, or the converse, is that maybe some theologians and philosophers are not as effective because of they're good but not excellent in English.
No, if you read philosophers now, it's all jargon. You can't. And first of all, half the page is notes, and half the notes are in German, so you're not even sure what they're saying. And I sometimes think that the modern theologian puts so many notes because they're embarrassed by the idea that maybe the Holy Spirit might do something. That's what I think. They're like, I call it notophilia, loving notes and stuff. But Lewis, what made Lewis, because if you read Pilgrim's Regress, that's a lot harder to understand. The brilliance is there. But when Lewis, you know that Mere Christianity began its life as broadcast talks that Lewis gave over the BBC wireless during the bombing of, when the Germans were bombing London, the Battle of Britain, and having to give 30-minute radio, addresses that obviously people are only hearing you, forced him to be able to say things in a simple term for a lay audience. And I think his writing became better after that. It really improved what Lewis was doing. And he wants, first of all, Lewis wants to be understood. I know that sounds strange, but a lot of academics, I don't know if they really want to be understood. Not that way. Lewis uses metaphors that are simple, but you never forget them. I mean, I love the Confessions, but I read it today and forget it tomorrow, and I've got to read it again. Kant, I forget 1 minute later. But Lewis, you read it once in Mere Christianity, and you never forget it. It's so detailed and so concrete and so incarnational, and it's simple. They're not highfalutin things, but he speaks to the common man. He speaks directly, and he wants to be understood. I mean, Lewis's collected letters are like this whole table long. It's unbelievable. He answered all these letters. There was no word processor or anything like that. He answered these letters and mailed them back. He wanted to be understood. One of the nicknames for Lewis that also describes G.K. Chesterton is the apostle of common sense. Is that Chad Walsh?
The apostle to the skeptics.
Yeah, did you know him?
No.
He's one of the very first ones. But they often called Lewis an apostle of common sense. Actually, oddly enough, George Orwell was as well, even though he was an atheist. Somehow he came very close to Lewis at points. So Lewis speaks directly to us, and he's not embarrassed to appeal to something like desire.
If you were invited by a group of theologians to advise them about writing so they could reach people better, as an English professor, in other words, they were seeking your expertise in that area, what would you say to them?
First of all, if you can use the smaller word, use it. You can always tell, we're teachers here, you can always tell if you have like an engineer in your class. Because what the engineer will do is he'll use a thesaurus, but he won't use a dictionary. You understand the problem there?
Yeah.
Just because words are synonymous don't mean they have the same connotation. So you'll get something with these big words, and it's not the right word. Go back, look at it. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. If you look at that, almost every one of those words is a monosyllable. If you look at Shakespeare, if you look at the King James English, it's amazing how many Germanic monosyllables are mixed in with the multisyllabic Latin words. Don't be afraid to use those simple words and speak directly. But again, it's like we're hiding behind euphemisms and things like that. But I will, if you really want to know the difference with Lewis, and this, seriously, if you want to reinvigorate the university, it only takes one change. In Screwtape Letters, Lewis taught me the phrase, the historical point of view. I will tell you what is wrong with academia in the last 200 years in one little thing. All right. If you are at a university, anywhere, and you're taking a class in Dante, let's say, your teacher will ask all sorts of questions about Dante. When was it written? What inspired it? What was linguistics? Who did it influence? Every single question you can imagine will be asked. But there's one question that will never be asked in the class. You know what that question is? Is what Dante wrote true? They don't ask that. That would be considered unutterably naive. And so we never get to the truth because we're almost embarrassed to get to a truth. We want to keep, this is deconstruction, keep the free play going forever. So we're always following, rabbits and stuff, and using jargon words and stuff, and we never come down to a simple truth. And if you never ask the question, is it true? It will not change your beliefs, and it will not change your behavior. You can forever keep it at arm's length. And
this is not specifically about C.S. Lewis,
Wait,
it's about another.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe it's beyond the purview of this.
Okay.
It is, it has to do with Elizabeth Clare Prophet, who's one of the Christian theologians that I read about. And Elizabeth Clare Prophet,
Okay.
who wrote a book, several books on Christianity, one of which focuses on what's called the so-called lost years of Jesus.
Oh.
The period of time when his activities are not reported in the New Testament. I've been very interested in that because it goes into his experience in Tibet, in what is now Tibet, which I think has implications for what's going on in Tibet. Because they're trying to kill Tibet, and I think they're trying to kill Jesus. And do you know, do you have any thoughts on that? Because it's an issue. And I don't know if it's relevant here, but it's about Jesus anyway.
I mean, there really is no evidence. I mean, Jesus grew up in Nazareth, regular Jewish guy, and I mean, there's no evidence. I mean, what I think is happening is that when you find a connection, right, if you see something in Hinduism or Buddhism or something that resonates with Christianity, it's kind of what we're talking about. In other words, general revelation can lead us to truth. I think the early church fathers were very smart to learn from Plato. And if I were a Chinese Christian right now, I would be very willing to learn things from Confucius. Not things about theology, but things about living the ethical life. I think, so what I'm saying is that sometimes we see this and we think, oh, they're quoting Jesus. But what's happening is that real truth is coming through. I mean, Plato got an awful lot of things right. But the early church fathers knew what they were doing. Okay, let me just give you a quick example. The word theos, which means God, and the word logos, which means the word, These are both words that go back to Greek philosophers, Platonists, Neoplatonists and stuff. They borrowed those words because they felt that there was truth in those words. But notice what they didn't borrow. They didn't borrow Zeus or any of the names of the gods. In other words, they understood that there were some truths that they could take and lead upwards into Christianity. Other truths were too corrupted in a way. They were too tainted by things. So what I'm saying is that we don't have to jump to the conclusion and say, because I see a connection, Jesus must have gone there. What's happening is that we are seeing that all truth is God's truth. We're finding bits and pieces of truth that point forward to the full and complete revelation of Christ. One more?
Well, one more, but I just wanted to comment on this gentleman's question about Lewis's style. Decades ago, I was studying Lewis's style rather closely and was reading the Screwtape Letters. Many people here, I'm sure, have read the Screwtape Letters. And I came, which was published serially, by the way, not as a book originally. And I came upon one word when he's talking about Screwtape is writing to his nephew Wormwood, who's an apprentice tempter on Earth. And he says, make sure that you fix your patient's attention upon his own feelings. And I thought, what a wonderful word is fix. One syllable, 3 letters, Anglo-Saxon. It says everything you have to say. And it's a wonderful example of Lewis's rhetorical genius. Then I got to the manuscript, which is right here at the New York Public Library on 42nd Street. The manuscript of the Screwtape. And I got to that part of the manuscript, and Lewis wrote, make sure you have your patient rivet his attention upon his own feelings. But he misspelled rivet. He spelled it R-I-V-I-T. So he crossed it out because he intuited that it was wrong. You see? So he wrote, have your patient rivet, and he wrote R-E-V-E-T. But he knew that was wrong, so he crossed that out. And then he wrote, finally, R-I-V-E-T. But by then, his confidence was so shot that he crossed that out too, and in very heavy letters, he put fix with an exclamation point. And I thought, so this is the source of Lewis's great stylistic choices. He just can't spell. Do we have time for one more question? A very short question.
Oh, by the way, for teachers out there, Lewis is one of the great writers, but like most British people, has no concept of how to use the semicolon. So don't learn. British people, Chester too, no concept of the proper use of the semicolon. Other than that, he's a great
by the way, his brother was a very fine writer.
He was, that's true.
Warren Lewis wrote on 17th century France. And my wife is a Francophile and read, as I did, all of Major Lewis's works.
Right.
And she loved it. They're beautifully written. They're just beautifully written. So she wrote a letter to Warren Lewis, my wife did. And in it she presumed to say that she thought he was a better writer than his brother C.S. Lewis. Now, Walter Hooper, who was with Warren Lewis at the time, opened up this letter and read it. And he told us what Warren Lewis said. And what he said was, you see there, Walter, you see? Now there's 2 of us. Is there a short question or a medium question that will invite a short answer?
Photo.
What is the significance of that
Listen,
photo?
that's Peter and John racing to the tomb of Jesus. I found out.
Well, that was very short. Is there a second?
Actually, it's actually Lewis and Tolkien.
Okay, I'm being given the signal, which means we're done. So, thank you very much, my friends.